President Edgar Lungu, I think, presented a very unique presidency to this country. He may not have been perfect, but if you look at where he came from, his background, how he was thrusted into top leadership of Patriotic Front and by extension the nation, I think he's an individual whose story must be told. And it can only be fairly and properly told if we can point at a grave and say he's buried here. That would be what I would want. And I think I share this view with so many Zambians who respect him. But we must create an environment. We can't just say, oh, because he's a Zambian, he has to be buried here, without creating an environment. We should just bring the body and bury it. Let's pay attention to what is happening on social media. Have you seen how many insults are flying around? Against the First Lady, against Honorable Tasira Lungu, and everybody else who's saying, including Makebi Zulu, who's trying to protect the dignity, and respect for the president. How many insults are going to them? And what warnings are being, the warning shots are being fired by the UPND supporters about what should happen if the body comes here? On the other side, have you heard how many insults are flying around by those who support Edgar Lungu? So we have a very toxic environment that needs to be cleaned up, and this must be cleaned up by show of leadership, by agreeing what is going to happen. People must feel protected that if this thing is going to happen, there will be no other untoward thing. If you've seen what these rogue media houses are actually saying, they've been threatening arresting Makebi Zulu, arresting the former First Lady, arresting everybody who was involved in this thing. So you don't create that toxic environment and then expect that within that toxic environment you can have a dignified send-off of a person who had the privilege of being your president. I think we who are alive owe it to the nation, to the family, and to the leadership of this nation to create an environment sustainable enough and appropriate enough that if we do agree as a nation, and this has to be an agreement that we're going to bring the body and bury it here, we will assure ourselves that there's going to be security, there's going to be dignity, there's going to be fairness in everything that's going to happen, especially because I do not expect that if we say we're going to bury President Edgar Lungu in Zambia, we will not have foreign dignitaries coming. They will be in this country. They will be on this soil. I would shudder to think about how they would judge us if they came and found an environment that is so dirty, that is so coarse, that is so toxic, in which people are not seeing eye to eye, but they want to go and bury somebody who had an opportunity to do it. So it is up to us, yes, on the opposition, but most importantly, it is up to those who wield the instruments of power, those who are in government, to fight to create an environment that is sustainable, that is suitable, and in which somebody is going to be shown the respect that every other president that we've buried in this country has been shown the time we've had these funerals before.
Hasn't this opportunity been lost? I mean, it's been 2 months plus, and the tension has only been getting worse. It's gotten so worse that the grieving family and the government had to go to a court in a foreign country. So haven't we already lost the opportunity to do all these things you say?
As a pragmatic person and as a patriot, and I think as a nationalist that I am, I do not believe in lost opportunities. I think that even at the very 11th, 59th hour, if you are committed to finding a solution to a problem such as we are having right now, you can find that solution. It just takes leadership. It takes brevity, and it takes agreeing that we have a genuine problem that needs a genuine solution to it, and we can find that solution. I don't think we've lost that opportunity. We will only lose it if we continue to fail to provide leadership at every angle that it is needed. There's need for leadership, especially if you've seen how those who support the UPND and those who support PF have divided themselves on this small issue. This requires leadership. In the absence of leadership, this will not be resolved.
In your assessment, do you think that in whatever good spirit the government thought it would be to go to court so they could stop the burial from taking place in South Africa, you think that this was a mistake by the Attorney General to take the former First Lady and her children and everybody else who's been taken to court? Do you think that was a wrong move by the AG?
If I have to give an objective answer to that question, that was a very big miscalculation by the government. It was a very big miscalculation. We were not dealing with an ordinary person. We were dealing with a president who had saved this nation. We were not dealing with an ordinary situation. We were dealing with a situation where the president who was saving this nation died on foreign land. These dimensions of the problem required intellect to resolve, they required soul searching to resolve, and they required accommodation to resolve. I think the government was wrong, especially because that decision seems to have been made in a rush. If you follow the events the way they unraveled, first there was a day of mourning, or national day of mourning, or period of mourning that was announced by the president. And when that problem, unfortunately, of the body not being brought here was announced, the president himself came and announced that, okay, we've stopped the national day of mourning, we allow the family to bury as they would wish. That is the position that the government reached. And some of us who had the concern, who felt that they should have brought the body here, when we saw the president announcing the end of national mourning and allowing the family to, and those who loved President Lungu to go and bury him, we mounted on the planes and went to bury. We were in South Africa when we heard about the fact that an order had been obtained. For me, it appears that decision was not thought through, was not planned, it was rushed, and I think it was rushed out of, there may have been views that developed within the 24-hour window between the time that we arrived and the time we're going to bury, that compelled the government to think, let's stop this burial. And my thinking at that time was that stopping this burial was not only to go the legal way, but to create an environment in which they can progress with dialogue, because of course human beings have changes of mind. So my thinking was that maybe government at that time had a change of mind. They wanted to go and continue persuading the family to agree what was mutually beneficial agreement on how they're going to handle the issue of the remains of a president. But what has now happened between that time and now is an erosion of trust, between government and the Lungu family. Is an erosion of our ability to account between the two parties, because how can you explain the fact that this case has been in court for close to 2 months without finding a solution? And on the occasion of granting that stay of the burial at the first time, the court even announced, I was in South Africa at that time, the court even said, we hope the parties can find time to go and sit together and find a solution to this matter. In other words, the court was sending a message that there's a better solution to this matter, which is by engagement, rather than coming to court and making these deliberations. And I think that's why I'm saying that I'm an optimist myself. I believe that even now, while we're still talking about whether we have lost time or not, we can still be able to come and sit down together. But to sit together as a nation at this juncture, it needs first leadership, but also the recultivation of trust, because this is what has degenerated in the last 2 months. If we don't put these ingredients back on track, and if we're not deliberate to engage the family and find a solution, I'm seeing this thing, progressing going forward. But you asked the question, I think for me it would be more dignifying for the country to find a way in which, using compromise, we can have a dignified burial of somebody who had the privilege to be the 16th Republican president as the president of this republic.
I'll be completely honest, I don't know what the right outcome, what the right position on all of this is. And it's only because it is so polarized that if I lean towards one side or the other, I begin to feel like I'm either wearing red or green. And not just for a public perception like the interview. Even on my own, even in my own house, on my desk at the office, I failed to actually establish who is right, who is wrong, which is the better option, because of how polarized it has become. With that in mind, what do the next steps look like for this very complex situation?
So what you've described is the tragedy that faces this nation. The very fact that we now have 3 classes of citizens. Okay, on the one hand, we have classes of citizens that support the government, that think that using the iron fist or using whatever means necessary to bring the body in is a route to go, so that we can continue enjoying the privileges of power, we can continue to enjoy the fact that we are incumbent. That's one set of citizens. There's another set of citizens, that believe that, look, we can't pass a blind eye to the fact that there was a very toxic relationship between the 60th Republican president and the current president, and that mainly comprises those who supported Edgar Chagolungu on the Patriotic Front. And by extension, people are grieving with what has happened to the Patriotic Front. Okay, and those who are inside the Patriotic Front still continue to blame the UPND government for the destruction that the PF has been facing. So all these things have been boiling over. So that's another segment of citizens. Then there are people who are as innocent as you are, who are in the middle, that can get caught up in anything that is going to come up, and that think that honestly we must find a solution to this matter. And that's why for me I suggested earlier that we've got churches, we've got credible NGOs, we've got even the chieftaincy. There are people that can be made to arise if we give them an assurance that we are prepared to find a solution to this matter. And for me, that is a solution to resolving the matter that we have. So if you're going to ask me the next steps, I'm very uncomfortable with the needlessly insisting that we're going to go ahead with the court case until we get to the end. Okay, just as I'm very uncomfortable with the feeling that the government has now that we won the case in the High Court, therefore we've got a solution to this matter. There is no solution to this matter. The solution to this matter is demonstration of credible leadership and finding a solution. This, Jonah, was a very small problem when it started. It was just an unfortunate death of the former president. Okay, and at that time, whatever leadership was attributed to that failed to find a solution, and that's why we ended up in court. I am thinking, me, I'm a villager, Turakwate Nsaka. Nsaka Taipwa, it doesn't resolve a case in one sitting. You always have to adjourn, go and stretch out, think through, consult, and then come back. As long as that position faces you, you will not bypass it. You have to face it head on. Now you face it head on after having carried out sufficient consultation to those that matter. We all have a way in which we would like to have this matter resolved. But quite frankly, we can only come up with a collective decision once we take into account the advice that we're getting from all over in terms of how we move this matter forward. So what has actually made Edgar Lungu's death and burial a bigger problem is not the death itself. It is our experience as a Republic of Zambia. And I think our historical relationship, which somewhat we were artificially thinking we don't have a problem. So this for me is a symptom to show you what kind of country we are living in. Okay, those experiences you see us going through in Parliament are all symptoms of what this country goes through. All these cases you are hearing from High Court, some of the judgments are right, some of them are questionable, one segment thinks it is. These are all symptoms of a systematic degeneration, I think, that our country has been undergoing. That needs to be confronted. And to confront that, it needs to be provided with leadership. And that leadership, even if it can't come from politicians, and I think it won't come from politicians, it must come from outside the square box of politics so that we can set the nation on a journey to development. When I was coming here, someone was telling me there's a record that we're the 60th most poor nation in the world. If we love this nation as much as we think we do, that must cut through our hearts. That we are in a country that is endowed in every respect, but today we are the 60th poorest nation. Without pointing a finger of blame at the UPND, I think that question, raises, it must steer you to anger as a citizen of the Republic of Zambia. You must be able to come and take stock of where have we been having it wrong, that we can't improve the economic well-being of this nation, that we can't improve the living standards of Zambians. That's what we must be preoccupying ourselves to deal with. There's been too much politics in this country, and I can pinpoint it from 2008 up to now. We have been a very political country, and we have failed to move an inch in terms of moving this country on the economic front, because we all are just addressing political issues, and some of them which are even non-issues. But to be branded, the 60th poorest nation in the world, when you have people that have been to school, all of us are more educated than those who fought for independence. A majority of us are more educated than those who ran this country for 28 years under Kaunda. And under those people that didn't have the kind of educational privilege that some of us have, how did they build this nation? That we can come in and begin to destroy it, slowly but surely, while creating gangs around the economy. It is not helpful for the nation.
MP George Chisanga, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of This Day.
I'm so grateful. Thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity to. I'm not venting, but I think I'm breathing.
Thank you so much.